You're watching Retro Cranbrook.
Following the 911 failure involving Tammy Ellis, it was necessary to hear what local politicians and the RCMP had to say about the huge concerns regarding our 911 emergency system. Did moving the call center to Kelowna cause the problems, or was there another reason why no one answered the phone? Stay with us as we continue looking to answer the question, what went wrong, 911 and the loss of Tammy Ellis, Part 2, starts now.
Dad, please bring 911 back here.
Well, when the RCMP told us in 2003 that they were contemplating taking the 911 call center from Cranbrook over to Kelowna, we fought it, quite frankly. We told them that we were worried about that. They guaranteed us that there would be, if not as good a service, better service even than what we used to get. That would appear not to be the case, and this is not acceptable to me as the MLA, and it's not acceptable to my constituents. We deserve the same level of service that people get in Kelowna and Prince George and Kamloops and in Vancouver.
As a result of what we now know about this incident, is the public safety concern to you?
This is a very big concern to us. Living in a rural area, you cannot phone 911 when you're in a situation, any situation, quite frankly, but particularly the kind of situation that these women were in, and get somebody on the other end of the line telling you to hold. They've got to be able to get through. We used to be able to get through when the call center was here in Cranbrook. Since it's been moved to Kelowna, there have been problems, and I am relying upon the RCMP to fix this situation.
What can be done, do you think, in the interim to make the public feel better about what's happening?
I think that the RCMP has to take this episode more seriously than what they seem to be taking it so far. If this is a capacity issue in their 911 call center in Kelowna, then they obviously need to increase their capacity. Again, you cannot phone 911 and be put on hold. It just is not acceptable. It's not acceptable anywhere, and it's certainly not acceptable here. So I think the RCMP has to take this seriously, and I think they have to increase their capacity so that people that are in the predicament, life-threatening predicament that these women were in, don't run into this sort of, Monty Python situation that they ran into, where they're hiding under a bed and they phone the RCMP on 911, and are told to wait, they're going to be put on hold. Not acceptable.
Bill, you a few years ago you fought really hard to keep the system here in Cranbrook, and now in reflection, what's your thoughts?
I think the RCMP have to do something to restore confidence. I don't know what that will be for sure, but they definitely have to consider increasing their capacity in Kelowna, and I think they also have to consider reinstituting a call center on this side of the mountains over here in the East Kootenay.
The topic today is the 911 system in Cranbrook. Just look over this way. Yeah, there was a tragic incident on December 17th where a lady had witnessed a horrific shooting in her home and phoned 911, and they put her on hold.
I think probably Kelowna is so busy compared to Cranbrook or a lot of the other cities that they dispatch for now that it's that makes a real difference. And but like I say, I don't know the circumstances of the case at all, or what happened when she phoned. So
yeah, let's just take another tack here. You fought very hard to keep the 911 system in Cranbrook, and there were situations where you provided scenarios where an event like this would actually happen someday, and here it is, it's happening.
yeah, well, at the time when we knew ahead of time, of course, I say we as City Council knew ahead of time that the dispatch center was going to move to Kelowna, and we were very opposed to it. When you do this regionalization of services, I think the smaller places lose out, and the local knowledge that's here is lost when you take something to Kelowna or amalgamate a dispatch center, all the dispatch centers into one area, one large center that doesn't know our area. We dealt a lot with people coming into our province. The three main highways into the province of BC are through the area that we dispatch for, which was Creston to Golden to the Alberta border to the United States border, plus 3 border crossings into our area. And a lot of the time, people didn't know where they were. They didn't pay any attention to what they've just driven through, and we could narrow it down with landmarks and things like that. When you know the area, you could figure out where people were. The dispatch center moving to Kelowna, we did fight very hard, I say we as a council, and Bill Bennett, our MLA as well, to try and keep it here for that reason. The time delay on calls, I've had many people stop me and say how frustrated they were that to call the RCMP and get put on hold for a long time, or people wouldn't understand where they were calling from, and it's been frustrating for them. But we were very disappointed and concerned when they moved the dispatch center to Kelowna.
Now, for this particular woman who, I realize that you don't know the circumstances of the case, but to have this happen in your own home, and then to be hiding under a bed and making a 911 call and then be put on hold, that just has to be the most horrific scenario that anyone can imagine.
Oh, I can't imagine if that's what happened, if she was put on hold. That would be so frustrating. Anyone who calls 911 is, I would say 80% of the calls we ever took on 911, the people are very upset. They're calling, it's hard for them to say what's happening, where they are. Most people are under a great deal of strain when they call 911, when it's about something major, so I can't imagine how that would be to be put on hold.
Yeah. Now, yourself, you were a dispatcher on the old system here in Cranbrook, in the Kootenays, I should say. There were times where you've had to actually jump in on the call to keep people on the straight and narrow. Can you talk about that?
Well, when we dispatched here, the ambulance dispatch was and still is in Kamloops, and we knew from dealing with them that when you put a call through to them, we would stay on the phone, because frequently they didn't know where. if you're calling 911 and you're at a specific address, it's very simple. Your address comes up on the screen and they know where to send the ambulance, but quite often it's on the highway. We have so many highways around here, and to send them to the exact spot, and often the Kamloops dispatch didn't know where, and I'm not blaming them, it's just the lack of knowledge of our area. And we would jump in on the call and say, this is where you have to send them. The local ambulance guys would know where to go once they were told the right spot. And I think that local knowledge is huge, and for getting calls, especially when minutes count and it's an emergency.
Lynn Nealon has suggested that if it was Tammy, the victim, calling herself, with her life slipping away, like you say, the minutes are precious.
That's very true.
Hey Liz, a couple of the examples that you've experienced regarding the 911 in the Kootenays?
Well, I've had people stop me since the dispatch center moved, because we were so vocal when they were moving it, especially particularly me, I guess, but to say how frustrating it is to call Kelowna. And like I say, I don't blame the dispatchers over there. They're really busy, and but it's frustrating to call in like an impaired driver and have it be on hold for 20 minutes. Well, it's pointless by then because the impaired driver is long gone, and people are just frustrated calling over there. It's with the time delay and the lack of knowledge of the area. When you're reporting something, like I say, it's not crucial if it's a minor incident, but if someone needs help quickly, it's that local knowledge and having the local dispatch. We were considerably quieter than Kelowna was, of course, but it could still get really busy here on a lot of nights because we dispatch for the East Kootenays, and it could get very busy, but just having the knowledge and who to get a hold of right away, and it's just frustrating having to go through Kelowna now. I think our area lost out by having it move over there. The city council, the mayor and the council met with Rich Coleman at the time when we were in Vancouver to try and have them not remove it. And now with our area growing, with the airport expansion and the city's expansion, and all the towns around us are very busy as well. It's a loss to our community, and I think it should be moved back.
Wasn't the idea of moving it to Kelowna to save money?
Apparently it was going to be a cost-saving measure. It's my understanding that it ended up costing more moving it over there. And we lost a lot of jobs out of here. There were a few people that went to Kelowna with the dispatch center. I don't know how many are left there now, maybe one or two that were actually from Cranbrook that know the area. But it's a huge loss to our area. I'd like to see it come back.
And Al, just finally, what do you think should be done to avoid situations like Lynn Nealon has experienced in the future?
You know, I don't know what their setup in Kelowna is like, and if they're understaffed or they don't have enough people. I'm guessing understaffing maybe, or not enough phone lines. I just don't know what the case is over there. You sure don't want anyone to call 911 and not get an answer.
Maybe putting you on the spot just a little bit, do you think this will be raised in council, the next meeting, and maybe kind of go around the table and see what could be done, a letter or something could be sent?
Well, I'm sure we'll talk about it. The mayor is actually away right now, and I know the media has brought it up, but I'm sure the city will be talking to our detachment about it, because like I say, we don't know the exact circumstances, and want to hear from the RCMP what happened exactly. So.
And I just thought of one other thing here that might be appropriate to the story, and that is a lot of people know that if you need the fire department, you don't necessarily phone 911. You phone the fire department, and you know they're going to come when you phone the fire department number. And I know people that have just done that.
Yeah.
So, what's your thoughts on that?
With the fire department, it's probably just as quick to go through 911 because they do put it right back to the hall. I have heard too of people calling the non-emergency number for the fire department to get them quickly, but it's because they dispatch out of the hall, that calls put through to them are put through right to the hall here, which makes a huge difference because the ambulance dispatches in Kamloops and the RCMP of course are in Kelowna now, but our fire department dispatches their own calls, so a 911 call is put right through to their hall and they look after it, so it's probably the best service you get actually.
That does speak a little bit to the suspiciousness of the service when people avoid 911 and they phone directly to a fire hall.
Yeah, I know it's frustrating for local people, and you want quick service when you call 911. That's for sure.
Thanks.
Following Tammy's death the previous December, RCMP Staff Sgt. Troy Gross, the man in charge of the Southeast District Operations Communications Center in Kelowna, was the person people looked to for the answers that were on everyone's minds. On March 7, 2008, he came to Cranbrook to address the growing concerns regarding the quality and efficiency of the East Kootenay's 911 emergency service.
Okay, and with that, we will call the formal meeting to order.
Staff Sergeant Troy Gross, NCO, IC, SED, OCC, Kelowna, and Inspector Jas Bassi, V911.
So, Staff Sergeant Gross, the floor is yours. Thank you, Bassi. Thank you for your attendance. This is our request, and we appreciate it.
And I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Can everyone hear me well? What I have done this morning is I have prepared a very short presentation. My objective, my goal in being here this morning is to provide some insight and some background on the 911 services provided by the Southeast District Operations Communications Center in Kelowna. I'm hoping to provide a clarification to help explain that the center that I manage houses both a police dispatch center and a 911 answering point, which are both separate but contained in the same building. The Southeast District OCC in Kelowna currently contains the 4 OCCs that used to exist in what the RCMP have described as the Southeast District, or the southeast portion of British Columbia. And in 2004, in the summer of 2004, the Nelson Dispatch Center amalgamated or integrated into the Kelowna Center, and it brought with it 8 regular positions. In the fall of 2004, Cranbrook followed. 10 positions came to Kelowna, and then the final integration occurred in January of 2006 when the Kamloops Center integrated into Kelowna. So in total, 36 positions relocated into Kelowna from the former OCCs in Nelson, Cranbrook, and Kamloops. Now the goals of the integration. I arrived in the system in the spring of 2005, so it's coming up on 3 years now. And I was looking back through an old business case the other day when I put this together, and I took this out of the business case. The goals of integration were to provide a higher quality service over time and to improve the supervisory system to the employees that exist in our center. And on that note, with the integration of all employees in Kelowna, it's worthy to note that every employee will always work with a supervisor. Because we're a 24-hour-a-day operation, supervisors work on the floor now with the teams. So there's 24-hour-a-day supervision. I wanted to give you an idea of the strength of the center. We have 93 civilian members on our establishment, and that includes the dispatchers and the operators. We have 1 public servant, and we have 8 regional district employees, soon to be 12 regional district employees. And I do want to spend a few moments explaining the role of the regional district employee in our center. But just prior to explaining that, I just want to provide for you a picture of the area we service. We look after approximately 50 detachments, 1,000 regular members, a population base of approximately 660,000 people, and our boundaries are, as you see them, the western detachments from Merritt, Lytton, Ashcroft. We go as far north as Barrier, Clearwater, and all the communities along the number 1 highway. And our eastern border is the Alberta border, and our southern border is the American border. Now, the 911 services. I want to distinguish between how it used to work in Cranbrook and how it works today in Kelowna. When the OCC was located in Cranbrook and an individual wanted to phone 911 for either police, ambulance, or the fire department, any of the employees sitting at any of the desks in the Cranbrook Dispatch Center could pick up the 911 incoming telephone line. And they would have a dispatch console at their desk and the telephone, so they could perform both functions at the same time. Now in Kelowna, we have a separate set of desks that do nothing but handle incoming 911 calls. So that is the difference between how it used to work in Cranbrook and how it works today in Kelowna. I'll go back to this in a moment, but I just also want to explain that the regional districts contribute funding to our center, and the funding is used to provide currently 8 regional district employees. And your East Kootenay Regional District contributes $108,000 towards this pool. Your contribution is based on the assessed property values in your communities. So you actually directly fund the 911 service that is used for the Southeast District, or the southeast corner of the province. It is all funneled through the Central Okanagan Regional District. So Gary Lear, the Human Resourcing Director in the Central Okanagan Regional District, coordinates all of this funding, and I work with Gary on all 911 related issues. In our environment, we term the 911 center as the primary service answering point. And that's important to know because that's the first contact with the public, and when the public calls the primary service answering point located in our center, we ask a very basic question. Do you want police, fire, or ambulance? Once we get the answer to that, we transfer the call to the secondary service answering point. If it is an ambulance call, the call is immediately downstream to Kamloops. If it is a fire call, it is immediately downstream to one of the 9 fire dispatches in this district. And if it is a police call, it is immediately downstreamed to another portion of our office where the other 93 employees work, handling all the police calls and looking after the police radio dispatch. There was a reason why we had to separate the incoming 911 calls from all of the telephones in the OCC. You remember I explained that in Cranbrook years ago, you called 911 and your phone call would have been answered by any one of the 4 employees working on any particular shift. When everyone began integrating into Kelowna, one of the byproducts of the integration was the realization that there was a tremendous workload that followed everyone to Kelowna. And typically there would have been watches of that time, and when I say a watch, that's a group of employees working at the same time. There were watches of 10 to 14 people, all responsible for having a telephone on their desk and a radio console on their desk. And it got to the point where all the incoming 911 calls couldn't be answered quickly enough because the operators were busy either answering radio requests from the members on the road, or they were dealing with other non-emergency telephone calls or other emergency phone calls. So our service wasn't as good as it had been prior. And there is a provincial call answering standard in British Columbia that requires every dispatch center to answer 90% of all incoming 911 calls within 10 seconds. Following the first integration of the Cranbrook OCC, our levels fell to 80%. And in order to rectify that problem, we dedicated 3 desks, and the 3 desks did nothing but answer 911 incoming calls. And the staff for those desks come from the regional districts. So the 8 employees that you fund are responsible for answering 911 calls. So there, I just went ahead of myself a little bit. Today, we are able to meet these provincial standards. Last year, our average was 91% of all telephone calls that came in on the 911 lines. They were answered within 10 seconds or less. The average time it takes us to answer a call is 6.5 seconds. So there we have a brief summary of the number of overall calls. So it's 200,000 approximately that come in every year. The bulk of those calls, it's a reverse bell curve. We have about 10 to 15,000 calls per month in the winter months, and 15 to 25,000 calls per month in the summer months, which corresponds to the increase in population because of the tourism that we see in this region of the province. Now, challenges. Whenever there is a change in service delivery, as the change brought by integration was met with, we had challenges. And I just wanted to go over some of these challenges because you've probably heard from your constituents about some of these issues. And one of them was becoming familiar with the geography of this expanded region. So now the 100 and approximately 25 employees that work in our shop have not only going to be familiar with either Kamloops or Kelowna or the Kootenays, but they've got to now be familiar with all of these regions. So it can be a slow process to learn the geography of this vast, vast area. And initially, the geography was an issue. I think it will always be an issue, but I have to say I'm very proud of our employees. As they become more familiar with the region, they're becoming more familiar with all the local terms for specific addresses. I want to advise too that we are really the conveyor of information, and what's most important is that the uniformed member on the road have a very good working knowledge of the geography of his or her detachment area. And as long as our information can be relayed to the member, they're going to find where they have to go. So even though geography or the public may feel frustration at times because they feel they're talking to someone who may not know the local term for the address known as Five Corners, when it's really the intersection of Smith and Brown. As long as the member knows where that location is, we'll get there. Another challenge we've had is resourcing itself. And you'll remember the first slide today talked about the number of positions that relocated to Kelowna. There were 36 in total. Of those 36 positions that came to us from Kamloops, Cranbrook, and Kelowna, Cranbrook, only 11 employees remain today. One of the challenges we found was that many people were not in a position to transfer from Nelson, Cranbrook, or Kamloops to Kelowna for either financial reasons or because their income wasn't the main income in the household. The workload in Kelowna was tremendously higher than what it had been in Nelson, Cranbrook, and Kamloops. So because of those two factors, we have seen high attrition rates. So that has been where our primary focus has been on the last few years. It has been recruiting and training. To compound that challenge for us, we received an increase of 22 positions, which was tremendous. And so you can see, doing the math there, we've had almost 50 positions to fill in 3 years. But we're very close to being there. You can see that I've documented here, we have hired and trained 15 employees each year for the last 3 years. Since December the 6th of 2007, we've had 14 new employees in our shop. The most recent one came in 2 days ago. So currently, we have 73 full-time civilian members. We have 39 temporary civilian employees, and of that group of 39, all of those will fill the current vacancies. So our numbers are good. What we're finding now is our biggest challenge is teaching our young dispatchers how to learn their job. And as you can imagine, with any business that you may have, when you have an overwhelming number of employees who are new, mistakes are sometimes made, but they're not mistakes of omission, they're mistakes of inexperience. Our role is to provide them the proper training and nurturing in an environment where they can learn and become better so that they can provide the best service possible to the public. So when I talk about some of the training issue, we have had tremendous demands on our staff to train a huge number of employees over the last few years. And we also have had demands on our provincial training establishment, because the Kelowna OCC is not the only communication center experiencing resourcing shortages. So we have a training facility in Chilliwack. It's called the Pacific Region Training Center. And this year we have 4 training sessions, and each session can turn out a graduating class of 12 individuals. So that's shared between all of the OCCs in the province. So there we have our current establishment. And my goal is by this time next year to have all 93 civilian member positions filled and to have a strong temporary civilian employee base, which is our casual pool. There's 1 regular member, myself, and 1 public servant that provides assistance to the unit. I also want to talk about December 17th, 2007. I believe everyone will be aware that on that occasion there was a shooting in Cranbrook. And at that specific time, we had 1 employee staffing the 911 desks. 2 people were working that night and 1 person was on a meal break. The supervisor on duty made a judgment call to leave the position vacant for a half an hour over the lunch break. At that time, we had a spike in telephone calls on the 911 lines. And in a 3-minute span, we had eight phone calls come in, and one employee was dealing with that increase in calls. And because of that, we were not able to sufficiently answer all of these 911 calls in a timely fashion. So we did not meet our provincial standard call answering times. And this is not satisfactory. And it is my role to make sure that we provide the best service we can to the public. So I called for a review of our 911 system. I wanted to find out why this happened. I want to make sure I can minimize or hopefully prevent this from happening again in future, because that is my role. So I provided 2 employees, and I asked Mr. Lear of the Central Okanagan Regional District to provide one of his employees, and the 3 of them reviewed the system, the call answering of the 911 desks. Coming from that review has been a commitment from Mr. Lear to increase our establishment of regional district employees from 8 to 12. So he is putting out the advertisements this month to increase the hiring, and I hope to have those positions on the ground. I'm looking at May now. But when that occurs, there will be 3 employees working every day staffing the 911 desks. And what that will allow us to maintain is our provincial call answering standards of answering 90% of all calls within 10 seconds or less, and I'm hoping we can actually improve upon those numbers. We will never be able to eliminate those occasions when there is a spike in calls, whether it's a fire at a local location where hundreds of people see it and all call 911 at the same time, or whether it's because there's an accident on the highway and passers-by are seeing this and phoning in when they drive by. You're always going to have those spike in calls, but with an increase in establishment, we'll be able to minimize the backlog and ensure most, if not all, calls are answered within that 10 seconds or less. We were also able to determine the cause of delays in 911 answering. And the reason there will be delays on occasion is because of the spikes in service. You just cannot get away from those occasions. I will ensure that we have always a minimum of 2 people at those desks. And then sometimes with our downstream agencies, if they are experiencing an increase in calls at their end, we're not able to hand off calls as quickly as we otherwise like to. But those happen rarely, and they're usually as a result of a storm or some act of God that causes an overload in incoming 911 calls. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the presentation that I had for you this morning. I wanted to keep it short.
What do you think of Staff Sergeant Gross's explanation of the events from the evening of Tammy's murder? Let us know in the comments below.